Dear students, welcome to the class on Advanced Computer Architecture. Continuing on the module 1, today we are going to study about the multiprocessors and the multi-computer and also multi-vector and SIMD computers. Multiprocessors and multi-computers. So we can have the memory which is shared or a memory which is unshared or distributed. So based on this, we are going to study the shared memory multiprocessors, distributed memory multi-computers, and also a taxonomy, that is a classification of MIMD computers. So yesterday we have seen the MIMD computers is multiple instruction stream over the multiple data stream. So how it is classified, that we are going to see here. In the shared memory multiprocessors, as the name indicates, the memory is shared by the processors. So all the processors, they can access the memory as a global address space. Processors can work independently, but they will be having the same memory resources shared among themselves. So when there is a change in the memory location and it is affected by one processor, it will be visible to all other processors because it is global. So this will be visible to all other processors. Shared memory processors, they can be divided into UMA model, NUMA model and COMA model. So UMA is Uniform Memory Access Model, and then NUMA is Non-Uniform Memory Access Model, and COMA stands for the cache-only memory architecture model. These models, they are differing from each other in how the memory and the peripheral resources are shared or distributed among the processors. The uniform memory access model, it is coming under the shared memory multiprocessors. These systems, they are represented by the symmetric multiprocessor. These machines, all of them will be identical. All the processors will be similar. And every processor will be having equal access to the memory. And their access times also, it will be the same. This is also called as the CCUMA, that is the cache coherent UMA, because when there is a updation or there is some change in some location in the shared memory, all other processors will have to know about the update. This cache coherency, it will be accomplished by making use of the hardware. So when we are realizing this architecture by using the hardware, we will take the effort of making sure that this hardware has to support a memory where when there is a change in one place, it has to be known to all other processors. So this is the concept of the Uniform Memory Access Model. In the UMA multiprocessor model, the physical memory is uniformly shared by all the processors. The memory words, they will be having equal access time by the processors. Each processor may have a private cache. The peripherals around this processing unit, they can also have the same fashion. That means they will also be shared by all the processors. The multiprocessors, they are called as the tightly coupled systems because they will be having high degree of resource sharing. All the resources whatever available in the network, they will be conveniently shared by the processors. So as shown in the picture here, the system interconnect what is there. That means the communication channel what is there. It can take the form of a common bus, or it can be a switch, a crossbar switch, or also it can be a multi-stage network. Some computer manufacturers, they have multiprocessor extensions of their uniprocessor product line. The UMA model, it is suitable for general purpose and it is also suitable for time sharing applications whenever we are having multiple users. It can be used for speeding up the execution of a single large program whenever the time is very crucial. So in such applications we can go for a UMA model. So when we are coordinating the parallel events, the synchronization and the communication among the processors, they will be done by making use of the shared variables which are available in the common memory. When all the processors have equal access to all peripheral devices, the system is called as a symmetric multiprocessor. So in a symmetric multiprocessor, all the processors are equally capable of running the executive programs. That means the OS kernel and also the input and output service routines. So in the asymmetric multiprocessor, only one or a subset of processors, they are executive capable. That means only they can be executed. The executive or master processor, it can execute the operating system and handle input and output. The remaining processors, that means which are not executable, they will have only the input and output capability, and so they will be called as attached processors. Attached processors, they will execute the user codes under the supervision of the master processor. In both the MP and the AP configurations, that means when we have the master processor and the attached processor configuration, memory sharing among these, they will be still in place. Next we have the non-uniform memory access model. So here it is different from the previous one. So here the physical linking of the symmetric multiprocessors will be there. So multiple symmetric multiprocessors will be connected and they will be having access to each other's memory. And all the processors will be not having equal access time to the memories. And also the access link, whatever is there, that will be slower. If we are including the cache coherence here, then it can be called as CC-NUMA, that is cache coherency NUMA. The non-uniform memory access model, it is a shared memory system in which the access time, it is going to vary with the location of the memory word. That means whether the memory word is local to the processor or it is local to another processor. The shared memory, it is physically distributed to all the processors and it is called as local memories to each of these processors. The collection of all the local memories, it is going to form a global address space, and this global address space, it is equally accessible by all the processors. So we can have a faster access if it is local to the processor, and we will have a slow access if it is local to another processor. So because we have to go through the connection network, there the delay is going to be added, and that is why there will be slow access. So the local memory is distributed to all processors, and the global address space, it is a collection of all the local memories. This picture over here, it illustrates the shared local memories. So we have the processing elements P1, P2 up till Pn. So these are the processors. Every processor is associated with a local memory. P1 is associated with LM1, P2 is associated with LM2, and Pn is associated with LMN. So P1 has direct connection with LM1, so easily it can access the contents of LM1. But if P1 wants to access the content of LM2, it can access, but it will take some delay because it has to come through the interconnection network. After coming through the interconnection network, it can access the contents of any of the processor's local memory. The P1 can access the local memory of the processor 2 or the processor 3. It can access the local memories. So the LM1, LM2, all these local memories put together, it is called as the global space. and the processors, all the processors can access all the content of the global space. But it can be accessed either locally or by global. This picture illustrates a hierarchically structured multiprocessor. The processors are divided into several clusters. Each cluster is either a UMA or a NUMA multiprocessor. The clusters are connected to the global shared memory modules. The entire system now it is a NUMA multiprocessor. All the processors belonging to the same cluster are allowed to uniformly access the cluster shared memory modules. All clusters have equal access to the global memory, but the access time to the cluster memory will be less than to the global memory. One can specify the access right among the intercluster memories in many ways. The CEDAR multiprocessor, which was built at the University of Illinois, had this structure in which each cluster it was making use of a Alient FX80 multiprocessor. So the model it was taken from that particular example. Other than the distributed memories, the globally shared memory it can be added to a multiprocessor system. So in this case, there are three memory access patterns. The fastest will be the local memory access, every processor's individual memory. The next is the global memory access, that means the common memory space what is there. And the slowest is access of remote memory, that means any processor if it is having the farthest distance from the memory, then it is called as the remote memory. So these models what was shown in the previous UMA and the NUMA, they can be modified to allow a mixture of shared memory and private memory with the pre-specified access rights. So we can combine the UMA model and the NUMA model. This is another way of interpreting the NUMA model. So we can see here multiple processors are present, and this set of processors they will be accessible to one set of memory, and memory of another processor can be accessed but going through the bus. So they will be having individual memories and also a global space. So whichever is the farthest, that becomes the remote. So here the CPUs and the memory, they can be having their own local memories, or they can also access the global space. The cache only memory architecture model, it is a special case of the NUMA model, in which the distributed main memories they will be converted to the caches. All caches here they are going to form one global address space, and there is no memory hierarchy at each processor node. The advantages of the COMA model are: the global address space will provide a very user-friendly perspective to the memory, and also here the sharing between the CPU and the memory is very fast because they are very close by to each other, and the data sharing is also uniform among the memory and the CPU. The drawback of the COMA model is that when we add more CPUs, it can generate a lot of traffic. The CPUs and the cache coherent systems, all of these they will be mismanaged if you are going to add more CPUs. And then the programmer, it may be she or he, the programmer's responsibility will have to make sure that all the constructs what they are including, they are going to ensure the correct access of the global memory. And also it is very expensive. That is also a drawback of the COMA model. When we go for designing and producing the shared memory machines, and the number of processors are going on increasing, this will increase the expense of the entire system, which is a drawback of the COMA model. All the caches, they are going to form a global address space. The remote cache access, it will be assisted by the distributed cache directories, that is the capital D, as shown in this illustration. Depending upon the interconnection network used, sometimes the hierarchical directories, they can be used to help the local copies of cache blocks. Initial data placement is not critical because data will eventually migrate to where it will be used. The drawback of the multiprocessor systems are it cannot be scaled. So we cannot go on add the processors or the memory. The efficiency is going to come down, and also there will be a latency tolerance. When we are going to access, there will be a delay for the remote memory access. The multiprocessor systems are best suitable for the general purpose multi-user applications, but the programmability has to be taken care. So in the multiprocessors, we studied about the UMA model, NUMA model and the COMA model. Other variants of these are where we have the CCNUMA, that is Cache Coherent Non-Uniform Memory Access Model. And also we have one more that is called as the CCCOMA. A cache coherent COMA machine is the one in which all the cache copies, they must be kept consistent. Several early commercially available multiprocessors are tabulated here. The S81 was a transaction processing multiprocessor which is consisting of 30 I386, I486 microprocessors which are tied to a common backplane bus. Next one, that is the IBM ES9000 model. It were the latest IBM mainframes. It was having up to 6 processors with attached vector facilities. Then the TC2000, it will be configured to have 512 M88100 processors interconnected by multi-stage butterfly network. So this was designed as a NUMA machine for real-time or time-critical applications. So the softwares, you can see that it is varying for each of these, and also we are having the hardware and the architecture differing from each of these. So these are some of the commercial multiprocessor systems which were used. The distributed memory multi-computers. So the name itself indicates that the memory here will be distributed among multiple computers. So like we had different shared memory systems, we can also have multiple variations of the distributed memory systems. But all of them will be having common characteristics. The distributed memory systems, they will require a communication network or a media so that it can connect to all other processors and the memory. Here we are having a generic model of a message passing multi-computer. A distributed memory multi-computer, it is having multiple computers over here. So every P plus M is one computer. So the system consists of multiple computers. This P plus M, it is also called as a node. These nodes are interconnected by a message passing network. So in the center we are having a network, and that is called as a message passing network. So it can be of different type. It can be a mesh, it can be a tree, it can be a ring, it can be a hypercube. So all these are the various static network topologies what are used for constructing a multi-computer. So each node, it is a autonomous computer which is consisting of one processor, a local memory, and also sometimes it can have disks or input-output peripherals. The message passing network, it is going to provide a point-to-point static connection among the nodes. All the local memories, they are private to the processor and it can be accessed only by the local processor. That is why the traditional multi-computers, they are also called as no remote memory access machines. Inter-node communication is carried out by passing messages through the static interconnection network. With advances in the interconnection and the network technologies, this type of computing, it has gained more significance because it is very much suitable for many applications and it also can be scaled and it is also fault tolerant. So this is also another depiction of the distributed memory systems. We can see here 4 nodes are present and these nodes are connected over a network. So the nodes here, they can have one-to-one communication, a broadcasting or a permutation, or it can also be a multicast. The important issue for a multi-computer are the message routing schemes, what it is using, the network flow control strategies, and how it is avoiding the deadlocks, and how it is making use of the virtual channels, and what are the message passing primitives, and also the program decomposition techniques. So now let us look at the advantages and the disadvantages of the distributed memory systems. So in the distributed memory system, we can go for scaling the number of processors. So when we increase the number of processors, the memory also can be increased proportionately. So each processor, it can access its own memory very quickly without any interference, and there won't be any delay when it is accessing its own memory, and it is very cost effective. It can use the off-the-shelf processor, that means simple processors, and the simple networking also, it is more than enough. So that is why the distributed memory system is very cost effective. But the drawbacks are, here the programmer is responsible for many of the data communication details between the processors. And when we are mapping by making use of the existing data structure, it may be difficult when we go for a global memory based on the memory organization. The non-uniform memory access time also, it is more for a distributed memory system. The modern multi-computers, they make use of the hardware routers to send the messages and receive the messages. A computer node, it is attached to each of these router. The boundary router, that means which is at the edge, it will be connected to the input output and the supporting devices, that is the peripheral devices. Message passing between any of the two nodes, it is going to make use of a sequence of routers and sequence of channels. Mixed type of nodes, they are allowed in a heterogeneous multi-computer. The inter-node communication in a heterogeneous multi-computer, that means it is having different types of computers. All the computers may not be of the same type. So that is called as a heterogeneous multi-computer. So the communication can be achieved by making use of compatible data representations and message passing protocols in a multi-computer environment. 3 early messaging multi-computers are summarized here. That is the Intel Paragon XPS N-Cube 26480 and Parse SuperNode 1000. With the distributed multiprocessor and the memory nodes, these machines are better in achieving a scalable performance. The message passing, it imposes a requirement on the programmers to distribute the computations and the data sets over the nodes to establish efficient communication among the nodes. The Paragon system, it had a mesh architecture, and the N-Cube 2, it had a hypercube architecture. the Intel i860s and some custom designed VLSI processors, they were used as the building blocks for these machines. All the three operating systems were Unix compatible with extended functions to support the message passing. Many multi-computers, they can be upgraded to yield a higher degree of parallelism with enhanced processors. So when we include the processors, we can go for a higher degree of the parallelism. So the commercial multi-computer systems like the Intel, the Incube and the Parsis, they were having different properties with respect to the node types and the memory, the network, the operating system, the application driver and the performance remarks. So we will see the classification of the MIMD computers. Parallel computers, it can be either SIMD or it can be MIMD. But in SIMD, what is going to happen? It is very suitable for general purpose application and it is not scalable. So where we cannot have large SIMDs, and that is why we move to MIMD. The architectural trend for the general purpose parallel computers, it is in favor of the MIMD configurations. So Gordon Bell, he has provided a taxonomy of the MIMD machines which is given over here, in which he is considering the shared memory multiprocessors as having a single address space. Scalable multiprocessors or multi-computers must use distributed memory. Multiprocessors using centrally shared memory have limited scalability. Multi-computers, they use distributed memories with multiple address spaces. So they are scalable with distributed memory. So the fast local area network connected workstations, they have given rise to commodity supercomputing. So Gordon Bell, he was the first to propagate the high-speed workstation clusters interconnected by the high-speed switches in terms of the special purpose multi-computers. The CM5 development, it was an move in this particular direction in the special purpose multi-computer. So the scalability of the MIMD computers will be detailedly studied in the later on topics. So in this section, that is the multi-vector and the SIMD computers, we will see the supercomputers and the parallel processors for the vector processing and data parallelism. So here we will classify the supercomputers as pipelined vector machines using a few powerful processors which are equipped with the vector hardware, or another one is the SIMD computers which are emphasizing the massive data parallelism. So we will look at the vector supercomputers and the SIMD supercomputers. So in the multi-vector and the SIMD computers, first one, the vector supercomputers. A vector operand, it will be containing a ordered set of n elements. So vector means it will be like an array where we have n is the length of the vector. So every element in this vector, it is a scalar quantity. It can be a floating point number, it can be an integer, so it can support any type of data. A vector processor, it will be consisting of a scalar processor and a vector unit. So this is a independent functional unit which can perform efficient vector operations. Here we can see how actually in the vector supercomputers the hardware has been created. The vector computers, they will be performing the vector operations efficiently. The operands what are there, they can be used directly from the memory, and then they will be loaded to the registers and then they are put back in the registers after the operation. So we can see here the operation, it will be consisting of multiple registers. So we can bring them from the memory and then we can put them to the registers. So the vector hardware, it is having a special ability to overlap or pipeline operand processing. So that means we can go for applying parallel over here. That means the pipeline operations what are there. That means the before one process is completed, the another process can be in the pipeline. So the vector hardware, it will support the pipelining operations. That means it supports the parallel operations. So we can bring the data from the registers and then we can also put them back to the registers, and every vector hardware what we have here, it is going to support the parallel operations, that is overlapping or the pipeline operands processing. The vector supercomputer, it is taking the help of the scalar processor as depicted in this diagram here. The vector processor, it will be having its own way of handling the pipelines, the control unit and the registers. It is supported by the scalar processor, and also a host computer, it can be managing the entire system over here, making use of the mass storage and the input and output devices. So the vector supercomputer, it is a combination of the vector processor as well as the scalar processor. A vector supercomputer is often built on top of a scalar processor. First, the program and the data are loaded into the main memory. This is done by using the host computer. All the instructions are first decoded by the scalar control unit. If the decoded instruction is a scalar operation or a program control operation, this can be executed by the scalar processor itself, because the scalar processor is also capable. It is having its own control unit, it is having its own pipelines. So the processor will complete if it is a scalar operation. So if it is not a scalar operation, then we'll have to move to the vector processing. So if the instruction what we have decoded, it is a vector operation, then it has to be sent to the vector control unit. This control unit, it is going to supervise the flow of the vector data between the main memory and the vector functional pipelines. The vector data flow, it is coordinated by the control unit. A number of vector functional pipelines, it can be built into a vector processor. So if we are having more number of pipelines, then the work will become faster. So the entire thing is controlled by the control unit. So in this way, in the vector supercomputers, by making use of the vector pipelines, the computations are done very quickly. The figure what we had just seen, that is about the register to register architecture. Vector registers are used for holding the vector operands, the intermediate results and also the final vector results. The vector functional pipelines, they will retrieve the operands from the vector registers, and also they are going to put the results back into the vector registers. So pipeline to registers, the operation will be happening. All the vector registers are programmable in user instructions. So we can make use of the registers and we can write the code so that they will be made use of effectively. Each vector register, it is equipped with a component counter. Something like we have the program counter, stack counter. So it will be having a component counter which will keep track of the component registers which are being used in the successive pipeline cycles. So when we have an account like this, it becomes very easy for the system to do the calculations very quickly. The length of each vector registers, it is fixed. It can be a 64-bit component register in a vector register like a Cray series supercomputer. So other machines like the Fujitsu VP2000 series, they use reconfigurable vector registers. That means it will be changing, it is not fixed, and it can match the register length with that of the vector operands. So if you are giving a bigger operand size, the registers also it will be altered to become bigger. If you are giving a data type which is smaller, then the register size also we can alter to be smaller. So in this way it could be altered in some of the supercomputers. In general, there are fixed number of vector registers and functional pipelines in a vector processor. Therefore, both the resources it must be reserved in advance so that there won't be any conflicts when we are making use of the resources. When we are using the resources for different vector operations, then the confusion should not be there. So, first only we have to fix the number of vector registers and also the vector functional pipelines. Some of the vector register supercomputers, they are the Convex C3800 family, the Digital VAX 9000 system, the Cray Research YMP and C90 machines. So in these we were making use of different type of the vector hardware architectures and the compiler and the software support. Depending upon the different applications, they had their own register size, they had their own operating systems and the compilers and the software support. A memory to memory architecture, it will differ from register to register architecture in the use of a vector stream. Vector operands and results are directly retrieved from the stored into the main memory. In superwords, it can be 512 bits as in the Cyber 205. The pipeline vector supercomputers, they started with uniprocessor model such as the Cray 1 in the year 1976. Subsequent supercomputer systems, they offered both the uniprocessor as well as the multiprocessor model for the Cray YMP series. Let us look at some of the representative supercomputers of the vector supercomputers. So many pipeline vector computers, they have been manufactured ranging from workstation to mini and supercomputers. The early examples, they include the Stardent 3000 multiprocessor, which is equipped with the vector pipelines. Next we had the Convex C3 series, then the DEC VAX 9000, then the IBM 390 VF. So like this we had multiple supercomputers. The Convex C1 C2 series, it was made by making use of the ECL and the CMOS technologies. And then the DSC VAX 9000, it was the digital's largest mainframe system which provided concurrent, scalar and vector and multiprocessing capabilities. The VAX 9000 processors, they used a hybrid architecture. The vector unit was an optional feature. The Cray YMP family, it offered both the vector as well as the multiprocessing capabilities. This is the abstract model of a SIMD computer, where we are having the control unit, the processing element and also the local memory. Because this is a SIMD computer, it stands for single instruction stream over a multiple data stream. That means the instruction is common. So it is a single instruction, whereas the data is different. Data streams are many. That is why it is called as a single instruction stream over a multiple data stream computer. So you can see here the control unit, it is passing an instruction to all the processing elements, and this instruction stream is a common one, that is a single one, whereas the memory and the processor are connected by using a data stream. The data will be passed from the processor to the local memory, from the local memory to the processor. So we have a common data stream. So this data stream, it is multiple. That means there is a connection from PE1 to LM1, that is one data stream. So next we have another processing element with the local memory. Like this we have multiple data stream. So by making use of this particular concept, we can go for building a SIMD supercomputer. The operational model of the SIMD supercomputer is presented here. This is based on a work by one person, H.J. Seigel. In the year 1979, he has given this particular architecture. So later on we are going to see some of the implementation model as well as the case studies of the SIMD machines. Here we can see every processing element, it will be having its own local memory, and then the control unit will be giving the instruction, that is the processing element 0 up till the processing element n-1 instruction stream will be shared, and then we are having the data between the processor and the memory, that is the data stream, and all these are managed by making use of a interconnection network by using some topology. So that's all for today's class. Again, meet you in the next class. Thank you.